His voice was silent when he heard the diagnosis, "You have throat cancer." Producer, piano player, songwriter, Buddy Hyatt. We know him as the former member of Toto, the rock group from the 80s, with such hits as Rosanna, Hold the Line, and Africa. He's performed, produced, and worked with amazing talents: Lee Greenwood, Randy Travis, Mickey Gilley, Lynn Anderson, Tracy Lawrence, just to name a few. And Buddy has been recording in Nashville on Music Row for over 30 years. But today, he holds the line as he watches what God is doing in his life and walking him through the diagnosis of throat cancer. This is his story of unshakable faith. This is today's Nashville. Buddy, I am so excited to be with you today, and I'm so honored that you'll be able to share your amazing story of faith. I have a girlfriend that's a mutual friend of yours, and she was sharing your story with me. And I said, I have got to get in touch with him because I want to share your story with our viewers. We are in your home studio.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm just so honored to be here.
I'm honored to have you all here, and thank you for thinking of me and allowing me to be on your show.
Well, you have quite the history. Record producer, but let's go back a little bit to the 80s and 90s and where it started when you received the phone call to be part of the Toto band.
That was 1998, and cell phones were kind of a new invention at that point, and I had one, and it rang, and I did not recognize the number. So I answered it, and it was a very heavy British accent speaking gentleman, and he just basically said, "Would you like to tour with Toto?" And I said, "Who in the heck is this?" And he proceeded to tell me his name, and he asked me, would I be interested in touring with Toto? But he did not elaborate on what they wanted me to do, and most people who know anything about me or the work that I do, I'm a piano player, keyboard player by trade. And I just assumed that they needed an extra one, because anybody that knows Toto knows that David Page is Toto. He is the keyboard player, constructs most of the songs, arranges and writes most of the material. So I knew they didn't need me to take his job. In the course of our conversation, it kind of got comical because he kept on asking me if I would move to LA and play and
well, who were you talking to?
This gentleman was their road manager.
Oh, okay.
All right, let's rewind the tape just a little bit. He owned a condo on West End Avenue here in Nashville, and he went to collect the rent. His tenant was blasting one of my contemporary Christian CDs that I had done in 1997. And I had done that CD as not only a player, but a singer and writer. So he said, "Hey, what's this guy's number?" So they called. Long story short, he didn't tell me what they wanted me to do, and I just assumed they needed a second keyboard player.
Oh, okay.
I was wrong. So the next day I got a FedEx with 7 Toto CDs and a round trip first class American Airlines plane ticket to Los Angeles. And I thought, well, if this is a joke, it's a pretty elaborate one. Now, let me rewind why I thought it might have been a joke, is because one of my closest, dearest friends is the original bassist for Toto, David Hungate, and he lives here and lived here at that time. He had left Toto years before, and he and I were buddies, and I thought he was playing a joke on me. Wasn't a joke. So I fly out there, they limo me to the rehearsal hall, I walk in, and there is a keyboard and there's a microphone with a straight stand pointed the other direction, and I'm thinking to myself, how are these guys going to know if I can play with the band if there's no band? That's very important to Nashville musicians, is how well you play together. Whether you play in time with the drummer, whether you race ahead of the bass player, whether you're in tune with the guitar player, all that is important. None of that could happen with just a keyboard and a microphone stand. So I just kept my mouth shut and looked around the room, and they all come out, all the Toto members at the time, Steve Lukather, Mike Porcaro, Bobby Kimball, David Page, and Simon Phillips. They came out, and only one of them would greet me, and that was Bobby Kimball, the lead singer. He's a Southern boy, by the way. He's from Louisiana. He came and gave me a big handshake and a big smile and introduced himself, and the rest of them had their sunglasses on and pretty much just looked at the floor and wouldn't acknowledge me. And I thought, I don't know if I want to work with people like this. But I went through with the interview. David Page sat down and he one-fingered, he just real simple one-fingered a harmony part on that keyboard, as though not to stump me. He didn't want to go too fast for me. Well, I had my Nashville numbers system. I had my paper and I wrote down the numbers of the notes that he played. And then Bobby Kimball stepped up to the mic and we sang those intervals together.
Interesting.
Well, it was correct because I heard it, I wrote it, I did what I do in Nashville, and I write the numbers charts. So he said, let's do this one. And he one-fingered another part, real simple to make sure it wasn't too fast for me, and I wrote it down. And I sang that the way that he played it, and he said, let me see that. And I handed him my paper, and it was a little, I love David, don't get me wrong. He's a nice guy, but he was not in a good mood that day. He jerked it out of my hand. He looked at it, and I'm going to paraphrase. He said, that's that Nashville beep. And I took it back and I said, that Nashville beep works for me. Well, at that time now, of course, here we are. I don't want to date our interview, but this was 22 years ago. I was much less gracious 22 years ago, and I had much less of Jesus in me then. And so I was not very polite. I basically said, this works for me, and this is what I do. This is how I do it. So he got up and started walking. He took off walking. And I thought, well, there goes that gig. They're not going to hire me now because I just popped off to the boss. He got clear to the other end of the room and he threw his hand up and he said, you got the gig. And I looked at Steve Lukather, the guitar player, and he was angry. His face was red because I had popped off to the boss. And I said, what gig? And he said, we need a background singer. And I said, what does it pay? And he told me, and I said, I think I can do that. It was like 4 times what any musician would make in Nashville at that time. It was a lot of money. So I took the gig, and for 2 years I learned a lot from them. We became really close friends, and I got to hear the best musicians and the best music on the planet every night for 2 years.
And you went around the world.
I got to see the world and got paid to do it. We everywhere from Japan, the former USSR, all over Europe. It's an experience, an invaluable experience that I can't explain, and it would not have happened if not for music.
But God had other plans for you, didn't he?
He did. He's had his hand on me since I was born.